Welcome back to Flying S Models. As always, I appreciate you tuning into the channel. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to do that so you can continue to see more kit build features like this 1/48 Tamiya F4U-1 Corsair. You'll find links to all the products used in this video build in the video description below. The Tamiya kit has been around a long time, but to me, it still represents the best Corsair in 1/48 scale. It's got some nice box art, markings for a couple different aircraft, and options for folded or extended wings, as well as dropped flaps. It's typical Tamiya in that it optimizes design simplicity, detail, and relatively low parts count. I'll start things off with a quick review of the kit parts and then work through a full build feature here. The instructions are well laid out and include well-illustrated paint callouts and assembly features. There are clear steps for all options, including those folded wings, dropped flaps, and open versus closed canopy options. The main sprues contain the main fuselage and wing parts, which have excellent detail and fine recessed panel lines and restrained rivet detail. The cockpit detail is really nice, with the only drawback being the decal seat belts and the lack of embossed instrument gauges. We'll show you how to easily fix those going forward. The clear parts are really thin, super clear, and cleanly molded, and you get an option for a framed or blown canopy. Tamiya decals are usually really thick, but these look pretty good, and we'll see how they go down later on during the build. I used pewter foil and fine solder wire to create seatbelts. You can see that full technique in a previous video I have up here on the channel. I like to paint most of the parts while things are still attached to the sprue, so I start with Tamiya flat black to lay down a base coat on all the interior areas, including the cockpit parts as well as the wheel bays and gear doors. When this was complete, I mixed a 50-50 ratio of Tamiya flat green and yellow green to create an interior green that I sprayed over the top of the flat black. I followed this up with an oil wash that I made by mixing a little raw umber and lamp black and thinning with mineral spirits. This was applied directly over the interior parts and allowed to dry. This puts a little depth in the recess area and adds dimension to the overall finish. When that had dried, I mixed up a lighter shade of interior green by using a little more Tamiya yellow green and sprayed that in the central parts of the interior areas. I lightened this up a little bit with more yellow green and sprayed it on the high spots. To bring out more of the kit detail, I dry brushed a little flat yellow on the parts. Make sure to remove nearly all the paint when you dry brush to get a nice clean look. I came back after that and used a custom mix of Vallejo acrylics and brush painted the formers and bulkhead highlights to really make them pop. Remember, it may look a little overdone at this point, but once the model is closed up and there's a lack of light in the cockpit area, those extra highlights will really stand out. I painted the various consoles, instrument panel, and gauges using Vallejo black. I used a fine tip brush and Vallejo gray, white, red, and yellow to pick out various knobs, switches, and cockpit placards. I also used the white to hand paint various gauge details on the plain instrument panel. I like to mix up 5-minute epoxy and apply to the instrument gauges to represent the instrument bezels. Make sure to let this fully cure before handling, or your fingerprints will dull the epoxy bezels. With the cockpit components complete, they can all be assembled and installed in the fuselage side. After that, the fuselage halves can be closed up and the horizontal stabilizers can be added. The wing components assemble without issue. You just have to decide whether you want to install the wings in the folded or extended position. I chose to display them in the extended position, so I used the appropriate inner and outer wing connecting pieces. These make for a strong joint, and the overall fit of the inner and outer wing sections is exceptional. The landing gear and wheels were painted with Tamiya flat aluminum. To bring out the details and add a little weathering, I used the same oil wash mixture that I had applied in the cockpit parts. The results are very convincing. The Tamiya kit fit is great, but not perfect, and I had to sand the main fuselage seam and add a little Tamiya fine surface putty to fill in a few small areas. When this was dry, it is easily sanded smooth. The flaps were installed without any problems and their fit is great. The kit does have the starboard innermost flap molded with a footstep in it, but this was only appropriate for the -1D model of the Corsair. I filled this in by heating up some scrap Tamiya sprue until it was soft, and I pressed it into the cutout. I filled the small blemishes that were left behind with more Tamiya fine surface putty and sanded that smooth. The engine crankcase was painted with Tamiya light gray and weathered and detail painted in the same way I had done the cockpit areas. I dry brushed a little red oxide on the engine exhaust, even though much of that detail will be hidden behind the cowl flaps. Before I painted the airframe, I used some small foam sections to close out the wheelbase and the engine cowl opening. I started by painting all the panel lines with Tamiya flat black. I airbrushed the tricolor US Navy scheme using AK's excellent real colors. But before applying those primary colors, I laid down a coat of their yellow zinc chromate to the areas that I would be adding some chipping effects to. I used the chipping effect medium to apply to various panels on the wing surface and fuselage that would have seen weathering during the normal use in the South Pacific. For the primary colors, always airbrush light to dark, so start with the insignia white undersurfaces. When that was complete, I freehand airbrushed the intermediate blue lower wing surfaces and fuselage sides. To give a weathered effect, I thinned the intermediate blue with a little insignia white and airbrushed that inside various panels. I followed this up with dark sea blue, again freehanded to create soft demarcation lines between the colors. I lightened this up with a little intermediate blue and sprayed that in the various upper surface panels. I used a stiff brush dipped in water to scrub away the chipping effects that had been applied over the yellow zinc chromate. To add some initial weathering effects, I applied a coat of white spirits directly over the flat AK paints and used oil color straight from the tube applied over various panel lines. I started with raw umber. When this had set for a few minutes, I removed most of it with a brush dipped repeatedly in clean white spirits. You can remove as much of it as you want to achieve the desired weathering effects. To add more effects, I did the same thing using a little white. This is what it looked like after the initial oil weathering effects. I gloss coated the model using AK's Real Gauzy prior to installing the decals. To help the decals settle down, I used AK's decal setting solution. The Tamiya decals perform pretty well, given Tamiya's history with usually thick decals and considering their overall age. I sealed those in using more AK Gauzy and then applied some AK Interactive panel line washes to add weathering effects to all the panel lines. When these were dry, I wiped them off with a clean paper towel. Any residual wash was wiped away using a Q-tip dipped in mineral spirits. I masked and airbrushed the wing walkways using Tamiya Flat Black. I sealed everything in using AK's Ultra Matte Varnish. The landing gear components were assembled and installed. I masked the windscreen and canopy and painted those. I first laid down a coat of interior green so that the framing would be green when viewed from the inside. I then airbrushed a coat of dark sea blue over that and installed those onto the airframe. All that was left was to paint and install the prop and other small details like the antenna wire. That was created using Easy Line. It's a nylon string that is super thin, stretches well, and is easily attached using super glue. I added the formation and ID lights as well. You can see how to make realistic lights and lenses on a previous video I have loaded up on the channel. Tamiya's 1/48 Corsair is an excellent model and builds up quickly and easily. Utilizing some advanced finishing techniques as seen here, even an average model can recreate a very realistic Corsair. I hope you enjoyed this full build feature. Please leave me some feedback with what you like or don't like about this video so I can adjust my approaches going forward. You can also check me out over on Facebook at Facebook/FlyingSModels and message me over there if you have any additional questions or need additional information. I appreciate you tuning in. Have a good one.